Friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. Another interesting session on machine learning. In the last video, we were discussing about univariate analysis, bivariate analysis, and multivariate analysis, part of exploratory data analysis. In this video, I am going to discuss about hypothetical testing. Let's start. This is an interesting quote from Einstein. Once you stop learning, you start dying. Fine, let's start. Hypothetical testing. It's coming under statistics. As you are aware, statistics is really important when we do machine learning. This hypothetical testing, it is introduced by Ronald Fisher, Jesse Newman, Carl Pearson, and Pearson's son Egon Pearson. These are all the people who introduced hypothetical testing. Even you have, Pearson correlation coefficient. We have separate video on correlation coefficient. You need to understand all those. Those are all terms are really important from a statistical perspective and machine learning perspective. See, hypothesis testing. That means first I am telling you what is a statistical hypothesis. A statistical hypothesis is an assumption about a population parameter. We have a separate video about population and sample. It is another term we use in statistics. You can watch that video under the playlist statistics, population and sample. Oh, a statistical hypothesis is an assumption about a population parameter. This assumption may or may not be true. So what is hypothesis testing? Hypothesis testing is a statistical method that is used in making statistical decisions using experimental data. 2 points you need to understand. We are making decisions because our machine learning models are used for making decisions, making predictions, used in statistical decision but based on experimental data. This is very important. Hypothesis testing is basically an assumption that we make about the population parameter. So this is a simple introduction to hypothesis testing. Here, another important term you need to understand is null hypothesis. It is denoted by H0, H suffix 0. Null hypothesis is a statistical hypothesis that assumes that the observation is due to a chance factor. Just we are doing some assumptions. Then we are just assuming. That assumption we call it as null hypothesis denoted by H0. Alternative hypothesis, it is denoted by H suffix 1, H1. The alternative hypothesis shows that observations are the result of a real effect. So here we conduct experiments and the observations we consider. In null hypothesis, we are just assuming. We are not doing any experiment. Here we do experiments and come up with the observations and we conclude. That is known as the alternative hypothesis denoted by the letter H1. You understood. I will give you an example, then you will get more clarity on that. Let us consider the example of tossing a coin. A null hypothesis might be that half the flips would result in heads and half in tails. That's what we can assume. This is a null hypothesis. Half the flips would result in heads and half in tails. The alternative hypothesis might be that the number of heads and tails would be different. When you toss for 10 times or 100 times or 50 times, the number of heads and tails coming can be different. That is the alternative hypothesis. So the null hypothesis, the probability it is 0.5 for head or tail. For H1, that is alternative hypothesis, it is not equal to 0.5. You understood? Suppose we flip the coin, see these are all assumptions, and now we are doing the experiment. Suppose we flip the coin 50 times, resulting 40 heads and 10 tails. We got 40 heads and 10 tails. Given this result, we would be inclined to reject the null hypothesis. Then we will reject the null hypothesis and we would conclude based on the evidence that the coin was probably not fair and balanced. The coin is not fair and balanced. That's the conclusion. So from this example, you got an idea about the null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Null hypothesis is denoted by the letter H0 and alternative hypothesis is denoted by the letter H1. It is based on the observations and the experiments. This example, from this you understood clearly. Now I am getting into type 1 or error, or we also call it as false positive. Type 1 error is also known as false positive. It is denoted by the letter alpha. A type 1 error occurs, we have videos for type 1 error and type 2 error that we discussed as part of the supervised machine learning algorithms as well. Here again you need to understand based on the hypothesis, null hypothesis. A type 1 error occurs when we reject a null hypothesis when it is true. See, you are rejecting a null hypothesis but it is true. In the previous example, the null hypothesis was wrong. Sometimes it can be correct as well. Type 1 error occurs when we reject a null hypothesis and it is true. The probability of committing a type 1 error is called the significance level. It's also known as the significance level. The probability is also called alpha. It is denoted by type 1 error is denoted by alpha, the Greek letter alpha. So type 1 error, it is known as false positive. It is occurs when we reject a null hypothesis but the null hypothesis is true. Type 2 error, or it is known as false negative, it's denoted by the letter beta. A type 2 error occurs when we fails to reject a null hypothesis that is false. Actually, the null hypothesis is false and we fail to reject it, then you will get a type 2 error. The probability of committing the type 2 error is called beta. It is denoted by the Greek letter beta. And the probability of not committing a type 2 error is called the power of the test. You need to understand the probability of not committing a type 2 error is called the power of the test. So you understood type 1 and type 2 error. See, from this you can clearly understand these examples are pretty interesting. See, this is the null these are all the null hypothesis and you will get the type 1 error from here, type 2 error. So what is the null hypothesis? The wolf is not present. That is our hypothesis. We are assuming wolf is not present. Then what is type 1 error? Shepherd thinks wolf is present when no wolf is actually present. That is type 1 error. Understood? What is type 2 error? Shepherd thinks wolf is not present when a wolf is actually present. This is type 2 error. The hypothesis is wolf is not present. Now type 1 error is shepherd thinks wolf is present when no wolf is actually present. And shepherd thinks wolf is not present when a wolf is actually present. That is type 2 error. You understood. It's easy. Then the next hypothesis, the null hypothesis is person is not guilty of the crime. The person is innocent. Where our, this is the null hypothesis. Person is not guilty of the crime. But what is a type 1 error? Person is judged as guilty when the person is actually did not commit the crime. Then it is a type 1 error. And what is type 2 error? Person is judged not guilty when he actually did commit the crime. That is a type 2 error. These are all good examples. From this you can understand what is null hypothesis, what is type 1 error, and what is type 2 error. Really good examples. Okay, that's sort type 1 error and type 2 error and hypothesis testing, alternative hypothesis testing, all we discussed. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. Thanks a lot.